What's up, Oklahoma Dan Handle?
Man, I'm just hanging around, hot air balloon. What?
You called me that because of that China balloon, didn't you?
Yeah, I got a different one for you next week, but it's gonna be along the same lines.
Nice, nice. Well, how's your week been, buddy?
It hasn't been bad. We had a lot of rain today, and we had a lot of just unnecessary stuff, and it's just kind of made the week golden. So,
Yeehaw,
how was your week?
dude. It's been fine so far. We've had sunshine here until today. It was overcast. It just sprinkled a little bit, but I had to take off today, and I went to Louisville. I had a doctor's appointment I had to go to, and then while I was in Louisville, I made it a double trip. I went and took the whole day off from work so I could interview a buddy of mine while I was there. I do this other thing, the bourbon folks, where I interview just all kind of people from the industry, from distillers to tour guides to tour bus drivers, whatever. And so I got to interview a buddy of mine today, so it was a lot of fun.
Nice. All right.
Yeah,
Well, are you ready to build a bar?
of course I am. Let's do it. All right, homie. So we're gonna do stuff a little bit different. The past 2 weeks have been a little different than the norm. So the past 2 weeks we had kind of revamped a little bit, and we did one episode on how to read a label. The second episode was on the different types of whiskeys, and these were just kind of questions that we had been asked from our friends. So it wasn't supposed to be an exhaustive list, or it wasn't supposed to be, whatever. It was just kind of in fun. Well, what we're going to do tonight, before we get back to introducing bottles and doing the whole route of why we pick certain bottles, you and I had kind of an idea of what our six best bottles under 30ish bucks would be. Um, And so that's what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about the best bottles to have under 30ish bucks. And this is for, people kind of new to bourbon that may want to start a collection. And this kind of goes in with how we've been doing things. So what we've been doing still stands. The bottles that we've added for a good reason, but these are just kind of bourbon bottles or whiskey bottles. I think one of yours is technically a whiskey, not a bourbon, but like bourbon American whiskeys that would fit the bill for falling under the $30 mark. So that way people that are just getting into it and they read all the hype about if you're not drinking Blanton's or you're not drinking Pappy or you're not drinking, whatever, this $400 bottle, then it's not worth anything. Well, these are some pretty dadgum good bourbons and whiskeys for under 30 bucks that can get you started. And so that's what we're going with tonight. But before we do that, what are you drinking on?
So I'm actually drinking on one of my bottles that I'm going to introduce.
Okay.
And so I'm having some mellow corn.
Ooh, nice, nice. Well, I am having a pour of one of my bottles too, and I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is right now. I want to wait until I talk about it a little bit later, but that's what I'm having, and you'll find out later. So,
Well, I'm just
I'll
kidding.
cheers
I'm
to
not
that.
drinking mellow corn.
Wink, wink. Cheers to that, buddy.
Cheers.
All right. So, I've always been called a gentlemanly guy, it's gentleman guy, nice. And
Yeah.
so, with that being said, I'm going to let me go first.
Yeah. No. Yes. Yeah.
Nah, I'm kidding. I'm going to let you go first. So, here's the kind of the rules. You and I decided we're going to take 6 bottles under 30ish bucks, and you're going to pick 3 and I'm going to pick 3, and you tell why you picked those 3 and I'll tell why I picked the 3 that I picked, but we'll do them one at a time. And so why don't you go ahead and share the first bottle under 30ish bucks that somebody should own, or just a bottle that we think is awesome that's under 30 bucks.
All right. Well, first, and these are in no particular order. because I think that they are all phenomenal in their own little way. But I'm going to go first and say this, that I do believe that Mellow Corn, I'm going to go ahead and do that one first, since I let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, on what I was drinking.
So that's what you're drinking.
That's what, yeah, it's what I'm
I had
drinking.
no idea.
Yeah,
I had
well,
no
now
idea you were drinking Mellow Corn.
you know that now, and knowing is half the battle, G.I. Joe. So, I did choose Mellow Corn, and Mellow Corn is a corn whiskey that is bottled and bond. And for anybody that is somewhat new to this video piece, you can go back and check out that episode on Mellow Corn from season 1.
Yep, I was going to say, we've already covered that.
Yeah, we've covered that. And so if you would like to go back and check that out as to a lot of the reasons to why. But for me personally, number one, I am a corn whiskey, and I do love bourbons, don't get me wrong. But where you lean more towards bourbons, I lean more towards the corn whiskeys like that. And the reason is, and I'll point this out directly in this, but the reason that I'm going to pick this one and the reason that I lean more towards the corn whiskeys, corn offers so many more things. It offers almost a sort of smoothness, a sort of, and especially in corn, mellow corn, it adds almost like a chocolate or a toffee flavor, I think I paid, I can't remember, I'll have to go back and look, but I think I paid like 15 or maybe $19. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's definitely not much.
And so you get a 750 ml for 15 or $19, can't remember. It's 100 proof because it's bottled and bond. And, there's a lot that you can do with it. With this specific brand, you can drink it neat, which I drink my bourbons neat and my whiskeys neat to begin with. I don't typically like to add any ice to them.
Right. Me too.
You don't either, huh?
Neat is the way I drink it. And I'm not saying that's the right way, but that's the way I drink it.
Well, right. Well, and the reason I don't is I like it to get all the proof I can get. I don't like to water it down in the end. But you can drink it. It's very good with ice. It's good with a drop of water, and even it's good mixed. I kind of like mine with like a diet Dr. Thunder or Dr. Pepper or whatever, and it kind of brings out certain things. So anyway, that's the reasons that I chose for my one of my bottles, Mellow Corn.
Mellow Corn, nice. Okay, and it's a Heaven Hill product, so that's good solid stock there. So that's a good choice. And you were talking about all the characteristics of it, and I'm assuming it being very mellow is one of the dominant characteristics.
It is very as an example, there are some that I drink that have this kind of Judy chop to the mouth, right? And it just kind of, it's not bad. It's just, bam, it's there. This is very mellow through and through.
Okay. Well, that's good. So for those that are starting a collection or looking to just buy something or heck, this list could even technically be somebody who's been in this kind of arena for a while, but all they hear is everybody else touting the 60, 70, 80, $100, $200 bourbons. Let's bring it back a notch. These are some really good quality, very price friendly offerings. So check that one off. All right. So the first one I'm going to bring, and I'll just say this, I probably way overthought my list because, I treated it almost like, not just like this is a silly episode that we're going to do, but it's like, if I could only drink 3 bourbons that are under $30, what would I pick? And and what I like to do when I make lists like this, I generally don't like to use the same ones from the same distillery. So I like to spread it out. I do like to figure out like what could be different, what's different enough that we could, I don't want to do 3 of the same type of bourbon. So the first one I picked is the godfather of wheated bourbon, other than like Pappy. But you can't find that really under $30. It's a tinge over $30. The Pappy is. So with that being said, we're going to go with Maker's Mark. So Maker's Mark. The reason I chose that first, it's about a $25 bottle for a 750 milliliter, and I like Maker's Mark. I like what their family history. So with every bottle, I mean, there's family history that goes there. It's got a good story that goes with it. But it's a wheated bourbon, and if you like wheated bourbons, there's a lot of people who don't like it, and that's fine. To me, wheated bourbon is a little more mellow than a traditional bourbon that has rye in it, and Maker's Mark to me is a little bit more because if you think about, and we haven't added this to the bar quite yet, not saying that we are or we won't later, but I think what makes Maker's Mark a little bit more sweeter and mellower than a lot of wheated bourbons even is the corn. I mean, 70% corn, 16% wheat, 14% malted barley. So it does have a high corn content and a along with the wheat. So, but to me, man, for 25-ish bucks or so, it's a solid drinker. It's 90 proof. So you're looking at, I mean, it's not a traditional, 80 proof whiskey. It's a kick up there. So it's 90 proof, but it's a good wheated bourbon. And it's easy to find. So for my first bourbon, that's what I chose. And like I said, the reason a lot of it has to do with just it's a good quality product, but it also has a great story with it. And so to me, we've talked about this on this podcast before or this video cast, whatever we call this thing. But to me, if you're going to have a bar and you're going to have friends over, and maybe you have friends that aren't into bourbon or aren't into whiskey, and they say, "Hey, what's this thing?" And then instead of just saying, "Oh, this is a brand out of Loretto, Kentucky," you can say, "Oh, let me tell you about this brand. It's got a cool story to it. I mean, it's a family recipe. So it's a cool story, and I like that added benefit with what I have sitting on the bar. So that's why I went with Maker's Mark first.
I got a question about that.
Yes, sir. Bring
So
it.
I remember,
All
like
day.
it's $25 for a
Mm-hmm.
fifth. I'm assuming ish.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it being. It used to be a lot more expensive. It seems like. It seems like I used to pay like $38 or $40 for something like that.
Maybe. I mean, they have different expressions of it. So there's like Maker's 46, which is a different stave combination. And one of the things I like about Maker's Mark is they're very much known for their their wood finishes and their stave finishes. So like for instance, they have this program where if you get a single barrel, you get to pick what staves go in there. So French oak staves or whatever. And so they're pretty good at that. But they also have like Makers 101. They have a several different options now. And you might be right. It might have been used to have been much more expensive than that. And I was, because I have a bottle of Maker's 46 here at the house, and I was going to use that, but that's a little bit over $30. It's about 35-ish bucks. So, but yeah, it's around 25-ish bucks now. So
Okay, well that's fine. I just remember it being, or not, maybe not even remember, but when I looked at it, you know, years ago, I'm like, man, that's like high dollar type stuff. Unless the price of wax has gone down.
it may have, because they absolutely they've made wax like, I mean, they've brought wax back into popularity. Wax was all but dead.
It was a dead language. I heard
It was 100% dead.
it was 100% dead. Not anymore.
Dead. Not no Maker's Mark
Return
and
of
wax
the
go
wax.
together like peas and pizza.
You eat that too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it with wax.
All right, what's your second bourbon? What's your second bourbon and or whiskey?
Okay, so my second one. All right, and to be honest with you,
Be honest.
probably my favorite
Okay.
is Evan Williams Bottled and Bond.
Ooh, nice.
So anybody that knows me knows that my
And I do.
favorite. You think you do. but you have no idea.
Oh, okay, good
Yeah,
call.
but I'll tell you who I am later. Evan Williams is like my go-to all the time. Now, that's
Yeah,
not saying that that's king or that that's whatever, but that's just my drink. Well, bottled and bond, I found about what 3 years ago, I think, and ever since then, I have been in love with it. It has this. I don't know the mash bill right offhand. um,
it's a traditional. I mean, I don't know what the percentages are right offhand, but it's a traditional.
yeah, I think it was pretty mid range. Like I think it was actually 70% corn, and then plus or minus whatever percentage uh, barley and but it's extremely good. It's extremely like it's not. It's got subtle hints from front palate to mid palate to back palate. The finish on there to me stays a little while. It's not. It doesn't stay like absinthe does, where it stays all night long. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't. It doesn't finish off quick. It hangs around, you know, until the street lights come on, and then it's got to go. And it's very good. It's almost got the same type of finishes as in, but it has to me some like it's got some fruit finishes and some
Oh
cherry.
yeah,
I mean some chocolate. And I know that it's not a dessert bourbon, but I think that it could definitely pair very well
yeah.
with. Truth be told, now here's the thing, and this is just I'm going to kind of go off here, and I did not plan on this, but Saturday night
Are you dog licking for a minute?
I'm dog licking for a minute.
Good.
We we had a bonfire Saturday night. Had some friends over. Did some s'mores and all that stuff. I had a glass of Evan Williams bottle and bond. It went perfect with graham crackers,
Oh yeah.
marshmallows, and Hershey's. Now
Mm.
I don't know if that was intentional, but I know that this fat guy was 100% in.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
on top of that, if you ever do get into the like stories and things like that, Evan Williams has, and I personally haven't been there, but you told me about it. It's not just a distillery tour; it's an Evan Williams experience.
Yeah.
And so, if for people that get into not only the backstory, because dude, I know people personally know people that don't drink, but dude, they get into the stories behind the label.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I say label like names and whatever. And so if you get into just the history of it, Evan Williams has a pretty cool history.
Yeah. So Evan Williams is an interesting character. You know, he was like a wharf master in Louisville, and so I mean, he's definitely a solid bourbon historical character. And you're right, the experience, the Evan Williams experience. So again, that's a Heaven Hill product. And so their distillery is in Bardstown, the Heaven Hill distillery, but the Evan Williams experience, and they have a little micro distillery there too that they make a few little products. But the Evan Williams experience, dude, it is like nothing else out there. I mean, it is a interactive multimedia experience, and it's if you've never been there, or I know you haven't. Next time you come here, you are going to go with me. But it's just I mean, it's out of this world different than anything else. And I do want to point out real quick, I looked it up. It is 78% corn,
Okay.
10% rye, 12% malted barley. So, and man, I was just telling somebody today, my buddy Roger that I went and interviewed, we were talking about bourbons, and I always, man, anytime we talk about bourbon, if I talk about it with a novice or somebody who's been in the business forever, and we get to talking about that one bottle. If you could drink one bottle the rest of your life, you could only have one bottle. That's the bottle I would pick hands down every time, because it is so versatile. It is such a complex bottle, and for $15, it's 15ish bucks, 17 something or whatever. Dude, that's one you can mix. That's one you can drink straight. That's one. I mean, it is complex, and when you think of like a $15 bottle of bourbon, you would think like, oh, that's like the stuff that's left in the bottom of the barrel. It's like ethanol, and no, that is not the case with this. It is like top notch.
Well, dude, and that's another thing too. With Evan Williams, when you drink enough of it, you start referring to him by his Christian name. It's Ebenezer.
Evan
And
needs a whip.
not only does it mix good and does it drink spectacular, and I know that probably some of the guys that's been in the game for a long time are gonna slam this right now, but I've even used that in hamburgers, like a shot of
Mhm.
that in hamburger meat.
Bro, I'm telling you, that's why you don't feel bad pouring a shot of that into some hamburger meat or pouring on some ribs and letting it soak, or I marinate chicken with it and stuff like that. And that's because it's such a reasonable price, excellent bottle. And I've seen taste tests where they've put that in the mix with other 70, 80, $100 bourbons, and I've seen it win like taste competition, people tasting saying I like this one better than this one. And I've seen it win competitions like that, so it's a solid bourbon. It's a solid bourbon. And
Absolutely.
as you pointed out, it's Evan Williams bottled and bond, so it's the quality's there. It's 100 proof, and so yeah, I'm down with that. I like that.
What
Anything
about
else you want
yours?
to
Huh?
say? What? Say it again.
I said, what about yours?
Okay. My second bottle, actually, it's the only bottle that I'm bringing to the table that is a Heaven Hill product. But so far, this is the third Heaven Hill product we've brought. And I actually have a bottle of it sitting here, so I'm going to show you. It is the J.W. Dant Bottled and Bond Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Now, I want to tell you a little story about this. The reason I like this, and this is going to be a bottle that we talk about a whole episode on coming up pretty soon because this is a phenomenal bottle right here. And I stumbled upon it accidentally about 2 years ago or a year ago, something like that. Um, I came across it. I had seen this label when I first got into bourbon, probably 2 or 3 years ago. I had seen this label, but I didn't know anything about it. And I knew it was a historical label. J.W. Dan, he's a historical bourbon figure. And so, again, one of the reasons I want to put that I want to add this to our six bourbons is because J.W. Dan is a historical bourbon character who actually has done a lot. We're going to talk about this in depth, but I want to give you a little taste. His first still, according to history, was carved out of a wood stump. So he didn't have the money to go buy a still or whatever, but he wanted to make whiskey. And so he carved a stump out. He hollowed a stump out and then ran his first. I don't know how long he did it or whatever, but his first whiskey he ever produced was out of a hollowed stump. But J.W. Dant, um, the historical pre-prohibition type whiskey was uh, I haven't ever tasted of that, but there's a couple bars here around Louisville and stuff that have the old stuff that for like probably $100 a shot or $200 a shot you can try some. And I don't have that kind of money that I can just do that. But so I saw this on the shelf about a year ago, and it's $16. It cost me $16. It's a Heaven Hill product, and they've done a phenomenal job on it. It's bottled in bond, so it's 100 proof. It's the quality's there, but like Evan Williams, it is a solid. It is very complex. I literally bought it thinking if I don't like this or it's terrible, I'll like what you talked about. I'll use it strictly for marinating meat or putting it in hamburger meat or whatever. But man, I was so pleasantly surprised at the complexity that's in this bottle. It is a delicious bottle, and the history goes a long way with me. I'm friends with two people in the bourbon industry that have distilleries right now. Stephen Beam, who owns Limestone Branch Distillery. J.W. Dant is his grandfather, and
Oh,
so he has Stephen Beam. Of course, he's also related to the Beam side of the family, but his mother's side of the family is the Dant. So he's related to the Dant side of the family. And so, but he owns Limestone Branch, which is Yellowstone bourbon. And the other person that's related to the Dants is Wally Dant. He's the guy, he owns Log Still Distillery. And so obviously, Log Still is named after the J.W. Dant, his grandfather's log still that he made. And of course, neither one of them can use this name because it's owned by Heaven Hill now. And so, all those legalities get in the way, but they have legal claim to this guy's. I mean, their stock from JW Dant, and so it's good, solid bourbon, historical. You know, there's good historical bourbon stock there. So, but this product, it's a delicious bourbon for $16. I put it if we talked at your last one. If I can only drink one bourbon in the world, it would be Evan Williams Bottled and Bond. If that wasn't available, this is probably what I would go to next because it's that good for a $16 bottle of bourbon.
Then I'm going to have to check out and see if I can obtain said JW Dant.
Yeah, you need to look for it because it's definitely a mighty fine bourbon. And we talked a little bit ago about how we drink our bourbon. And I don't know if this is solely why you do it, but there's many reasons why I drink bourbon neat. I drink it room temperature, neat. And one of the reasons I prefer it that way is I like to experience it the way the distiller wanted me to experience it. Now, I have had whiskey before or bourbon before that's like, it's a little hot for me or it's a little whatever. And so I'll add water or I'll mix it or I'll do whatever. I'm not opposed to drinking it that way. But the main reason I do choose to drink my bourbon this way is because this is how the distiller wanted you to experience it. That's why they chose, 100 proof, whatever. Or my next one you're going to see is a different proof. And the reason they chose it is because, they had reasons. So that's why I like to drink my bourbon neat. And if I absolutely don't like it that way, which I've only really come across two that I didn't like that way, that's what I'll use for mixing. And, I'll drink it on ice or, with some water droplets in it or whatever. But that's generally my thing.
That's the reason that I drink it neat. I like it neat, dude. I've tried it, and this is just my own preference. But for those of you that are wondering, I used to keep a bottle. I don't like to put ice in it because to me, ice waters it down. But what I used to do is I would keep a bottle in the freezer and then pour just a little bit. And I did that. I used to do that with George Dickel. But I was noticing that
George is what?
Huh?
George is what? Just kidding.
George is Dickel. I used to do that, but I noticed that the back palate, when I would put George Dickel in my mouth, at the very back of the throat, it would. It's almost like you couldn't taste him. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's why I do it.
All right. What's your final bottle?
Sorry, I still am not.
Got you a little choked up, didn't it?
Yeah, George Dickel always gets me. My last bottle is Early Times Bottled and Bond.
We talked about that before.
I've talked about that. So let me tell you a little backstory as to why I choose this, but also a little backstory of its predecessor. Maybe if I said that right. So Evan Williams, Early Times Bottled and Bond is a very good product, and just like Evan Williams, it's very versatile. The profiles range from fruity to vanilla to chocolate, the whole nine. What's even more to me, so there's a story behind it as well, and again, go back and watch the other episodes because Early Times Station is where it gets its name from. But the reason that I chose that is years ago, I used to drink their whiskey, Kentucky whiskey. It wasn't a bourbon because it was aged in used barrels, 80 proof, very heavy on the corn, or at least it tasted. And I used to love Early Times because the taste to me was just, there was something different, man. It was like sweet. Honestly, the best way that I can put it is the Early Times tasted like cornbread. It kind of had a cornbread taste. Well, I stumbled across Early Times Bottled and Bond I guess it was like in September, maybe September, October. I've never heard of it. I didn't know that they did that. And I was like, I got to buy this to see if it tastes better, if as good or better than early times whiskey.
Right, right.
Dude, I poured me a pour of that and I let it breathe. So one of the things that I do with mine is I'll pour it and I'll swirl it and I let
Mm-hmm.
it breathe. And dude, when I let that stuff breathe, it was unrealistically good. So for me, if Evan Williams was not around and I had to choose a second bottle to drink, it would be early times through and through. That's my
Are you
answer.
done?
That's my answer. I was trying to do like that suspense, like where we all just kind of gaze at each other and just reflect on the sermon that I just gave about early time. You feel more like a man now.
Yeah, I do. I do.
I do too.
Actually, I do.
I do too.
And to your point, I hadn't had Early Times Bottled in Bond until we did that episode a couple months back. And then I was at I was at a pizzeria in Louisville, but they had a bar there and they had that. And I got a pour of that. And it was actually so good, in my opinion, that I went out and bought a bottle of it like the next week.
That
So
was your
it
first
is
time ever having that. What? Right?
yeah, I'd had early times before, and actually, I'd had early times plenty of times before, but I never paid attention that it wasn't a bourbon. I just always assumed it was a bourbon. So when you said that, you could probably go back and watch that episode and look at me feverishly typing, trying to figure out that you were a liar. Because,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, it's not a early times is not a bourbon, but the early times bottled in bond is, and it was phenomenal. It was actually, and actually, what was kind of cool about that is, if I remember correctly, I went to the bartender and I said, what do I have to have up there? And he said, what range are you looking at paying? I told him, and he's like, here's two that are really good, and um, the one we're talking about,
Or
my mind just
ETBIB.
my mind just went blank. The early times was one of them, and I was like, yeah, let me try that because we just did a podcast on this, and now I was really impressed with it.
It
So,
was good.
all right, and so my last one that I'm bringing to the table, I want to say two things about it before I tell you what it
Wait,
is.
wait,
It
wait.
was a
Hey,
it
hang
was,
on, hang on, hang on. I got to do a drum roll.
go now.
Go, yeah, go now.
Okay, it was a throw up between two bourbons to me, and these two bourbons come from the same distillery. And so, and I get in trouble a lot when I talk about these two bourbons. And so it was a toss up to me between Ancient Age and Benchmark Foolproof. And I say specifically the Foolproof. And that's the one I went with. I went with Benchmark Foolproof. And that's what I'm sipping on tonight. That's what I'm drinking on tonight. Um, And the reason I chose that over Ancient Age, I get in trouble all the time because these bourbon aficionados and bourbon like snobs, I like to tell people, if you can't afford Blanton's or you can't afford, I don't, you know, if you can't afford all, Blanton specifically, well, Ancient Age is the same exact recipe. It's not the same product. It's not aged the same amount as Blanton's. Blanton's is a single barrel. Ancient Age is not. But guess what? If you can't afford $100 or $150 for the market value of Blanton's, Ancient Age is a pretty damn good bourbon, right? And we're not here to talk about Ancient Age because I didn't pick that. But the same goes for Benchmark. And Benchmark has a whole line of products. This the basic Benchmark. They have a foolproof. They have um, bottled in bond. I think they have a single barrel. So they have a whole list, but it's the same thing. So like if you follow the guys that talk about just the premium bourbons, like Stag and E.H. Taylor and all those guys, Benchmark is the same recipe as George T. Stagg. It's the same recipe as Buffalo Trace. It's the same recipe as Eagle Rare. It's the same recipe.
Really?
Now, I will qualify this by saying it's not aged the same. It's not, I mean, so there are differences. I mean, there's a reason, Stag is a $199 bottle or whatever. But this bottle right here is 21. I paid $21 for it. I think kind of the average though is about 25, $26. But it's foolproof. And the reason I chose this over Ancient Age is just a traditional, you can get 80 proof, 86 proof, or 90 proof. I went with Benchmark because it's foolproof. It's 125 proof. And so if you try to look up what other foolproof bourbons are out there, there are several. There's 1792 foolproof. There's Weller foolproof. There's a bunch of foolproofs that are in the 60s, 70s, $80. This is the only one foolproof that is going to be in that $20 range. And so I think it's important if you're new to bourbon or you're new, maybe you've researched a lot of bourbon, but you're new to like building your collection. If we're going to sit here and say, here's 6 of the best bottles under $30, there needs to be variety. So like the reason I chose, Maker's Mark it's a wheated bourbon versus your traditional bourbon with the rye as the finishing grain or whatever. And then, the JW Dan is a traditional bourbon, but it's just got a really cool story. And if you cared to look up the story and have it on your bar when people ask what's the deal with this, you have a cool story to tell. But I think you need variety of product. So, if you had 50 bottles of 80 proof bourbon, what's the point in that? Or you had 50 bottles of 90 proof, whatever. But if you have a full proof in the mix, and this actually is going to be one that we do a full episode on coming up pretty soon. But if you have a full proof in the mix and it's a high proof, and so when you're first starting your bourbon journey, this is not going to be this is going to burn. It's going to take you a while to build up to this, but you've heard me say a bunch on this podcast that when I first got into bourbons, I liked everything from 80 proof all the way up, but I got mad at people that were like, "Oh, I only drink 120 proof, or I only drink whatever." But the more I get into bourbons, the more I realize that these 125 proofs, these 130 proofs, these high bourbons, they have a lot more flavor to it. And this isn't one that you're going to mix. This isn't one that you're going to, put in your hamburger meat. This isn't one that you're going to do any of that stuff with. But this is one that you can say to, you invite somebody over that may be new to bourbon or don't know anything about bourbon, and you can play a joke on them and make them drink this and make them choke. No, just kidding. No, but it's something that you can show them the difference in an 80 proof flagship bourbon and a higher proof, more specialized bourbon. And dude, I love it, man. It very quickly became I say it's one of my everyday drinkers, and that makes it sound bad because I'm drinking 125 proof every day, but it is one of my everyday drinkers, and it's cheap. It's cheap enough that you look at where I'm at on this bottle, I need another bottle. So, and I kind of owe an apology to Benchmark because we have talked about this before on this podcast, and I said I don't really care for Benchmark traditional, the 80 proof, but I actually had some today, and it's a good bourbon. I mean, it's a good flagship bourbon. I mean, nothing stood out to me, whatever. But when I tasted it again today, it was like, it's better than I thought it was. And so, but I get in trouble with the bourbon purists because they're like, even though it has the same mash bill of Stag and E.H. Taylor and Buffalo Trace, doesn't mean it's the same product. And it's like, I know that, but if I'm somebody on a budget and I can't afford Stag or Stag Junior or E.H. Taylor that's $60 or whatever, then man, for $21 I can get this all day long, or for 25-ish bucks maybe, I don't know. I'll pay $21 for it, but if you can get it for that price, why not, man? It just adds some variety to it. So that's my final pick, man.
What's the proof on that?
125. 125.
And it's pretty huh. It is
Dude, it's
sweet.
good. Yeah, I mean It doesn't. It definitely. It's got a kick to it. It's got a hug to it, but it's definitely not. It's not like I've drank high proof stuff before that tastes like literal gasoline, and this isn't that at all. I mean, it's got complexity and flavor to it, and it's. I promise you, dude. If you buy a bottle of this, if you can find a bottle and you buy it, you won't regret it, and you'll keep it stocked on your bar for sure.
I'm gonna have to see if I can find one of them. Well,
All right, so I think we got another decent one. I won't say we're good at this, but we're decent. We're other podcasters are like the $200 bottles. We're like the $15 bottle, but
we're your ghetto connoisseurs.
yeah, we're the ghetto connoisseurs. We're the ghetto whatever, but it works. So
it does. I'm not. You know what? I got a happy heart and a happy bank account. It ain't broke.
That's true. That's true, man. Well, all right, dude. Well, until next week. Cheers, and remember, at one point there were two sets of footprints walking down the beach, and then I looked back and I saw one set of footprints, and I knew at that point you had fallen off a cliff or something, and so it was just my footprints that I saw. So
it was just your footprints.
The story goes something like that. So it's about some footprints or something.
And when you look and see the stars in the sky, and you see one like shooting across, and like you'll think to yourself like wow,
Yep. I'll think of you. I'll think of like how you fell that time.
Yeah, that would be great if you did that.
Hi, Ollie. I love you, man. Bye.
Bye.
If you like what you heard tonight, check us out on these social media platforms. Just search for My Journey Through the American Spirits. Also, check us out on our new website,